Billionaire gets a call. Dad, come get me. He has no kids, but the voice freezes him cold. The world knew Richard Hale as a billionaire who had everything: power, influence, and wealth beyond imagination. Yet one night, a single phone call shattered the illusion of control he thought he had. The voice on the other end whispered desperately, "Dad, come get me." Richard froze. He had no children, no family left in the world. But what chilled him wasn't just the impossible words, it was the voice itself. Broken, terrified, and unmistakably real. In that moment, he knew something dark was unfolding, something tied to a past he had long ignored, and a truth about race in America that even his billions couldn't silence. Richard had grown up in privilege, shielded from the struggles that defined so many other lives. His father's company built its empire in the 1960s, during an era when racial inequality wasn't just common, it was protected by law. Richard never asked how his fortune had been made, never questioned why some doors opened so easily for him while others were nailed shut for people who looked different. Now in his late 60s, he lived in a towering Manhattan penthouse, untouched by hardship. His wealth bought him distance, but not immunity. When his phone buzzed at midnight, he almost ignored it. No one called him at this hour. But when he heard the trembling voice calling him Dad, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: fear. Not fear of losing money or power, but a bone-deep terror that something was very wrong. The call traced back to a small southern town he hadn't visited in decades. Against all logic, he felt compelled to go. His driver tried to dissuade him, but Richard's mind was locked on the sound of that voice. There was desperation in it, a plea that cut through his disbelief. He boarded his private jet before dawn, flying into a world he had long abandoned, a world that hadn't forgotten him, or the harm his family's fortune had left behind. The town of Brookhaven hadn't changed much since Richard last saw it. The cracked sidewalks, faded storefronts, and worn-down houses whispered of poverty that lingered for generations. His family's factories had once loomed over this place, offering jobs but exploiting cheap labor. White workers were paid fairly. Black workers were underpaid, mistreated, and discarded when no longer useful. As Richard's limousine rolled through, eyes followed him, some filled with resentment, others with a quiet, hardened anger. He felt it in the air, a hostility he could not buy away. At the police station, he inquired about strange phone calls, only to be met with cold stares. "Don't know what you're talking about, sir," an officer said, his tone laced with disdain. But Richard noticed the sideways glances they exchanged, as if they knew something he didn't. Later, he drove past the edge of town, where once segregated neighborhoods still bore the scars of discrimination. That's when his phone rang again. The same voice, weak, trembling. "Dad, come get me. They won't let me go." This time, Richard demanded answers. "Who are you?" But the line went dead. Haunted, he began digging into local archives, desperate for a clue. What he found made his blood run cold. In the late 1970s, one of his father's plants had collapsed in a structural failure, killing dozens of black workers. Families claimed the company ignored safety warnings, but their lawsuits were buried, their voices silenced. Among the victims was a man named Elijah Turner, a young father whose child had never been found after the tragedy. Richard stared at Elijah's photo, noticing the resemblance, the strong jawline, the dark eyes. It was impossible, yet undeniable. The voice calling him Dad could be Elijah's lost son. But how? The town's whispers grew louder. Some said the past was returning. Others said blood never forgets. Richard couldn't shake the feeling that what he was hearing wasn't just a voice from the past, but the echo of injustice itself, demanding to be acknowledged. One stormy evening, Richard followed the voice. Each call grew clearer, pulling him toward the outskirts of town, past the fields, past the abandoned factories, until he reached the ruins of the collapsed plant. The building was skeletal now, a ghost of greed and negligence. As lightning split the sky, Richard's phone rang again. He answered with shaking hands. "Dad, I'm here. I've been here all along." The voice was so close it felt like it came from the walls themselves. He stepped into the broken structure, heart pounding, and then he heard them. Not just one voice, but many, dozens, pleading, crying, calling out for fathers, mothers, justice. The walls seemed alive with their echoes, trapped in time. Richard fell to his knees. The realization hit him like the storm outside. These were the voices of the men and women his family's empire had exploited, abandoned, and forgotten. Their suffering had never left. It lingered in this place, demanding to be heard. The voice that called him Dad wasn't claiming blood, it was claiming accountability. He wasn't their father, but he carried the weight of what his family had done. For the first time in his life, Richard Hale wept. Richard returned to Manhattan a different man. The calls stopped, but the memory never left him. He knew he could, not undo the past, but he could no longer ignore it. He poured millions into reparations for Brookhaven, rebuilding schools, funding scholarships for black students, and creating memorials for the workers who had died. For the first time, he used his wealth not to shield himself, but to confront a truth that had haunted generations. But change was slow, and the resentment remained. Many refused to forgive him, and rightly so. Money could not resurrect the dead, nor erase decades of pain. Richard often stood at the edge of the memorial built on the ruins of the old factory, where the names of the lost were etched in stone. Each time he swore he heard the faint echo of a voice. "Dad, thank you for coming." It was not forgiveness, but perhaps acknowledgement, a reminder that the past can never be erased, only faced. The billionaire who once thought he owned the world had learned the most expensive lesson of all. Wealth cannot buy peace when justice has been denied. And as he gazed at the stone, he whispered to himself a truth that every generation must face. If we ignore the cries of the oppressed, they will echo forever.